Eclipse season has come early. I'm doing a live season ahead overview on March 5th. I've never done a live thing before, so it's experimental. I also set up a way to book chart interpretation sessions on my website like a normal person. Previously, it was this cryptic process where you had to email and send a bike messenger at 2 p.m. to my house, and you had to know a secret password, and it was a whole thing, and I just made it a normal booking process. I'm also doing experimental beauty and skincare astrology readings with many disclaimers. I'm not a doctor, it's for informational purposes only, and it's not intended to replace medical advice. It's also not intended as a way to postpone or refrain from obtaining medical advice. I want to refine my process before I make it a long-term standard offering. And you'll get a copy of Skincare Zodiac for your sun, moon, and rising. The calendar is still on sale. This is the calendar, and it comes with a digital version that is configured to your natal chart. Monday is kind of busy. The moon is in Capricorn for most of the day, so you'll be down to get down to business, with extra emphasis as the moon will be coming off of an early morning sextile with Saturn to really put you in the mood, to put your nose to the grindstone. Later in the morning / early afternoon, depending on where you are in North America, the moon makes a trine to Uranus. So if you wake up early and hit the ground running, or hit the ground at a steady Saturn pace, what the moon trine Uranus brings could be some sort of reward or insight, although that's not guaranteed. There could be a very practical, actionable insight or development of some kind. It's the moon trining Uranus, so that could be something like zapping into manifestation very quickly, or like you're done faster than you originally thought. Monday night is pretty chill for the most part. You have the moon sextiling Neptune in Pisces, getting a little preview of the upcoming dark moon in Pisces a few days later. So you can calm down until late night when the moon enters Aquarius. And then things get weird or frustrating or doom. You start doom scrolling because late night you'll just have the moon applying to a conjunction with Pluto in Aquarius. And Mars is just stationed direct, so you're likely to have around Sunday or Saturday or Monday, there's a lot of like intense emphasis on Mars themes, whatever Mars rules in your chart, wherever Mars is in your natal chart, whatever house it's in natally, something related to those areas of life is now moving forward, but Venus is about to start moving backwards. So it's a weird changing of the guard where you're gonna feel equipped to move forward in one place, and that could give you a false confidence. It can make you think that that readiness or sense of clear direction applies to everywhere in your life, and it doesn't. Venus-ruled themes in your life are going downhill. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to get bad. They're up for reevaluation, and this reevaluation will take you through the next month and a half. March and April are the craziest part of the year, arguably. So buckle in. Early Tuesday morning, very early Tuesday morning, Mercury conjoins Saturn. And last year, I talked a lot about how this is like Mercury is reporting to the boss with the annual report. And this is Mercury in Pisces. So the annual report is like, it's a PowerPoint presentation with a lot of pictures. It's maybe like an impressionist painting / poetry PowerPoint presentation. Saturn's gonna kind of be like, huh? But it's Saturn in Pisces. So in a way, they'll be able to kind of understand each other, but also there are bound to be some wires crossed or misunderstandings, or something is unclear more specifically. You might be pressed to make something more clear if you are Mercury in the situation. You might press your messenger assistant to be more clear, and that's okay. There's not a ton about Tuesday that has to do with like being enraged, except Mars is recently stationed, so Mars is marked with a little bit more intensity, but nothing really touches Mars on Tuesday. So things will be unclear. There will be need for clarification. It's okay to bring that up. If you're the one asking, if you're the one being asked to clarify, it's okay. It just comes with the territory. You're not doing anything wrong. That's how it is. And last year I also mentioned that I think it's interesting that generative AI models that create images and video are referred to as diffusion models, which vary Mercury and Pisces. Mercury being the agent of creative production, his tool is referred to as diffusion, as opposed to generative text, which is a transformer. And most of the day, the moon is just applying to a sextile with Venus. So it's an artistic day, but it's also be careful. Don't be too artistic with your creative annual report, PowerPoint. Again, it's definitely a PowerPoint. It's not like the Jeff Bezos Amazon meeting. Have you seen that? You should look it up. It's brilliant. Amazon meetings, nobody uses PowerPoint. You make a 6-page memo that's very clear. You bring it to the meeting. The first 30 minutes of the meeting, everybody reads it together, so nobody comes to the meeting not having done their homework, and then they discuss it. This is not that. You will want it to be that, especially if you're Saturn, or you will imagine that it is as practical and productive as that if you're Mercury, but it isn't. Okay, so the moon is applying to a sextile with Venus. So the moon in Aquarius applying to a sextile with Venus in detriment in Aries, about to station retrograde. So this will give us more previews or lead-ins to what the retrograde period is about. If you're having a wonderful time, just side-eye it. If you want things to move forward in this manner, it's going to take a long time, and they'll probably end up moving forward differently if they do, differently from how you thought after mid-April when Venus stations direct. And Tuesday night is bound to be uplifting and surprising because the moon in Aquarius applies to a trine with Jupiter in Gemini. For the rest of the day, it completes that aspect in the evening. So Tuesday, the moon touches the benefics. The moon, activator of the zodiac, is activating the good parts of life, but the good parts of life aren't as good as they could be on the entire spectrum of possibilities of things being good. It's Venus in detriment and Jupiter in detriment, so they're both not quite as resourced as they could be, but we'll take what we can get on Tuesday. Late night on Tuesday, the moon is applying to a square with Uranus. Moon in Aquarius, activating Uranus in Taurus from a stressful place. So your productive insight, productive easy insights on Monday, maybe that comes back to bite you in the ass. Maybe it's a different thing from a different part of life, pinging Uranus. So there's a wrench thrown into something, or upsetting news, or outbursts. Although this is something with ideas and rules, a need for rules, a need for new rules, a need to draw a line in the sand. Aquarius is the line in the sand. Something about infrastructure, how that relates to your needs, getting your needs met. And Uranus and Taurus being disruptive of the actual material resources. So maybe something crazy with commodity futures markets affects the price of your utilities. Wednesday is chill, so make up for lost time on Wednesday. You need to, or get ahead. You probably checked off much from your to-do list on Monday, maybe celebrated a little bit or relaxed on Tuesday. Wednesday you can prepare for the rest of the week, and the moon is balsamic, but Wednesday the moon is void, nothing's going on. It's about to be the dark moon. It's technically the dark moon in Pisces. The moon doesn't move into Pisces until around midnight, but this will be the night of the dark moon, invisible moon. Most people on the internet refer to it as the new moon, but the new moon is when the moon went dark and then it is beginning to be visible again. So when the moon is invisible, conjunct the sun from the point of view of Earth, that is the dark moon. So the dark moon in Pisces goes exact technically Thursday afternoon. So Wednesday night will be the dark moon waning. Thursday night will be the dark moon waxing. The darkest part of the cycle goes exact Thursday afternoon. But Wednesday night will be technically the dark moon. So super late night Wednesday, the moon moves into Pisces, and then Mercury sextiles Uranus. Mercury in Pisces gives a little zap to Uranus as the moon is winding down. All day Wednesday, the getting ahead I'm talking about is finishing things, bringing things to a close as best you can. And the Mercury-Uranus sextile is it's likely to be something artistic, delightful, even if it's upsetting. There could be a surprising clarity or exactness despite the creative, ephemeral, impressionistic nature of the communication or delivery or conveyance. What's contained in the conveyance is likely to be surprisingly concise. But the moon is balsamic, it has no light, so it's a little zap jolt to the Mercury ruled places in your chart and pertaining to finishing, closing down. And the dark moon in Pisces goes exact at around 4:44 p.m. Thursday, all that's happening is the moon closing in on the sun. The dark moon goes exact at 4:44 p.m. So you have another day to finish. I went to art school, so I spent many late nights finishing stuff, working all night. And then I would go to school the next day and learn we have more time or something. That didn't happen every time, but that's like Wednesday and Thursday. If you have stuff to finish, try to get it done on Monday. Then try to get it done on Wednesday. Then try to get it done on Thursday. But all these days were like finishing, closing things down. Wrap it up. The South Node's in Virgo, so wrap it up. Don't worry about it being perfect. Just get it done. And this dark moon in Pisces is not an eclipse, but the last lunation in Pisces, September 17th, 2024, was a lunar eclipse in Pisces on the North Node. And the next lunation in Pisces will be a lunar eclipse on the North Node in Pisces, September 7th, 2025. So this is not an eclipse, but the nodes are in because for it to be an eclipse, it has to be closer to the North Node than it is currently. The next full moon after this will be a lunar eclipse on the South Node in Virgo. Things are getting weird. The light is about to get weird. And this is a lunation with normal light or no light. It's a dark moon. There are hints of infrared. What might be made visible that you can't normally see either later in the spring or further out in September, or something referencing that lunar eclipse last September. Think about what was happening around September 17th, 2024. And this, although it is not an eclipse, it will lay the scene. You've done all this finishing. You're like clearing the groundwork for the emphasis in the Pisces area of your life moving forward. This will shut down the old paradigms, making room for the new. But I wouldn't recommend doing like new moon stuff here, just like in terms of magical practices. I would more just like with great intention, wrap up old things. Be ready for new things. Clear the deck so that you're ready. But don't make too elaborate projections on what it's going to be moving forward. And I already have made very elaborate projections, and I know that all my plans are probably going to be really different later. But Saturn is in Pisces. So this is a dark moon in Pisces with Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, the North Node in Pisces, in addition to the sun and the moon. So you got to plan. It's okay. I have an aversion to planning sometimes because it always just changes. But something I learned recently is that I can plan and then I can decide whether or not to move forward in the moment. You might not have that problem. You might love to plan and then execute on that plan exactly, but I have a really hard time planning because I realize that what I know in the planning stage is really different from what I know at the moment that I planned it. I think someone said, I forget who this is, that like to have like a long-term plan, like a 30-year plan, and don't have a 5-year plan, just take things in the moment, but still plan. Saturn in Pisces. And since Saturn is still in Pisces, you might be punished for like deviating from your plan. You might be wrong if in the moment you decide to change your plan. Just make sure if you change your plan in the moment, don't do it out of like laziness or because you don't feel like it. It should be like for a good reason. And that reason can come from your intuition. It doesn't have to be rationalized for anybody else, although with Mercury conjoining Saturn this week, it might be this week, but Mercury is not always going to be conjoining Saturn in Pisces. Anyway, Thursday night, the moon will square Jupiter in Gemini. So putting your family farmed livestock on blockchain still sounds like a great idea, and you're idealizing it. And it might get you into trouble later. There's too many communications. So the moon in Pisces wants to chill with their obligations, and the moon is still dark. It's not new yet. It's not visible. So you might not have the energy to do the super fun, super technical, super chatty, super social Jupiter and Gemini stuff, or address the backlog of the past year of Jupiter and Gemini. So it's a square. Kind of stressful, but good. Optimistic, but overwhelming to take full advantage of, possibly. Late Friday night, we get a taste of the moon finally touching Mars, which is recently stationed, and it's a trine. The moon in Pisces coming out of darkness, beginning to be visible, touching Mars, which is recently stationed, so is more loud. You're getting a hint, a real sense, a felt instinctual sense of what that means for you, what that means for the Mars-ruled parts in your chart, or the place in your chart where Mars is natally, whatever the sign of Cancer is in your chart, and Pisces, activated from the Pisces realm of your chart, you'll get some sense of what Mars now moving forward after a long period of several weeks moving backwards means. So going way back to like September, things that were beginning around then, September, October, those things are finally going to start to be wrapped up and resolved. And again, don't apply this to all of life. Just apply it to the Mars ruled places in your chart, because Venus is about to station retrograde. So the Venus parts of your life, the things that Venus signifies, beauty, love, luxury, pleasure, those things are a little more complicated. And Mars is stationing, squaring Venus loosely. You might even feel those areas of life in a bit of friction. Don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just, it's time for Venus to take off all her regalia, strip you of your comforts. For Venus retrograde, I always quit sugar during that time. This is not a time for sugar. That's how I pay the underworld lords, keeping her hostage for several weeks. Or it's one way. Last year, I systematically removed 7 vices or pleasures from my life. There's a video that I made about that last year that you can look at. I'll link it. I'm also making a separate Venus retrograde video, which I'll post soon. Okay, so actual Friday, the moon conjoins Saturn in Pisces. So the moon hits Mars early morning on Friday, it hits the go button, and then it hits a stop, a hard stop. I like early morning connections of the moon with Mars for making sure you wake up early if you're not that type of person. I want to be an early morning person so bad. And since I heard about chronotypes, every time I read about chronotypes, I'm the wolf. I'm the night watch. I don't want to be. I want to be an early morning person. I want to be awake when nobody else is awake and start my day before everybody else and be done with my day by like 10 a.m. But it's always like pushed back a little. Like I am awake when nobody else is awake getting stuff done, but it's like 3 a.m. It has really been challenging coming to terms with that. If I could choose a chronotype, it would be the early morning person. Anyway, so I've had a lot of success, like accidentally, even without an alarm, waking up really early on days when the moon is connecting with either Mars or Uranus. Or if I wish to set an alarm, it usually works out really well on those types of days. I have a lot of Pisces, so sleep is really important. You're supposed to wake up early. Sleeping is lazy, but I'm not one of those people who could just like 6-7 hours of sleep. No, I need 9 to 12. That's just how it is. Again, if I had to choose, it's not what I choose, but maybe I need to reframe that. I need to find a way to make it good and like be proud of it and really own it. That's very challenging because all of the world tells me that I'm lazy for sleeping and for being up late at night. But enough about me. Get up early on Friday. A lot of like early afternoon, evening, the moon's applying to a sextile with Uranus. So you get another zap and the light is building. And at night, the moon conjoins Mercury. So Friday has kind of like a buzzy, busy, intellectually stimulating and maybe bodily stimulating feel. Maybe Friday evening is a good time for like a heart-to-heart conversation. This Mercury in Pisces is like the feelings. I was talking about this last week. The feelings are getting in the way. Mercury in any water sign, the feelings are more important than, or they're more prominent. Whether or not they're more important depends on the situation and the person, but they're normally more prominent and acted upon, or like they feel more actionable than the rational intellectual considerations. The emotions really color the thinking. So this moon Mercury on Friday, if there's a heart-to-heart you need to have, that might just develop naturally, and that's beautiful. If you want to talk to someone about something that has like emotional heart-to-heart overtones, Friday could be a natural time for that. Friday supports that action. But do be careful because it might be more like just a time to like be with someone, connect. It's moon and Mercury, so there's like connection and it's emotional. Maybe it's not a heart-to-heart sorting things out because the moon then conjoins Neptune late at night. So things could get confusing, delusional, intoxication, like drunk talk. I think you're so special. Maybe overdoing it. So that's Friday night. And then late Friday night, around 2 a.m. Pacific time, the moon moves into Aries. And it's gonna sextile Pluto early on Saturday morning. And it's March already. And March is crazy, and April is crazy, so buckle in. So the moon makes a sextile to Pluto. The moon is now also ruled by Mars in bad shape, but better than recently. It's now just in the sign it functions the worst in, instead of being in the sign it functions the worst in and retrograde. There's a little more energy, initiative, clear direction, sense of what it means to cultivate safety. How can you be safe in the world? How can you protect things without breaking other things or breaking the thing you're trying to protect? If you have a gun and you live in an apartment and someone enters your house and you have a gun and you shoot that gun and it goes through the wall and hits somebody unintended, Mars retrogrades in Cancer can create casualties stemming from the act of trying to protect life. So the moon is ruled by Mars. Mars is ruled by the moon. You can see a clear image / instinctual knowing about Mars moon stuff. Offense, defense, and taking care of yourself and your home and your loved ones. So if you get up and do like a crazy American Psycho workout on Saturday, that might be great. It's the moon squaring Mars. They rule each other, so you could get in like that crazy workout. Just watch out for injuries. Don't go too hard, but good for you getting after it. With extra early morning support with the moon sextiling Pluto, hence American Psycho vibes. I was thinking about that movie and how like Neptune and Capricorn back in the 90s, there's this romance around business, like big business, corporate life. And then later, when Neptune was in Aquarius, the movie American Psycho came out about that. It was like about that Neptune and Capricorn time, but it was like Saturn ridiculing Saturn, like Aquarius Saturn ridiculing the old ways of Capricorn Saturn, a murderous fringe, out of bounds look at all the things wrong with psychotic corporate lifestyle, or the things that were psychotic about operating within that whole business context. I'm just putting off talking about Venus stationing retrograde. So look for my separate video on that later. Venus will be stationing retrograde Saturday, March 1st. Venus stations direct Saturday, April 12th. This is Venus stationing retrograde in her sign of detriment and stationing direct in her sign and near her degree of exaltation. Conjunct Saturn and Neptune. It's not pure Venus. There's like some limitations and also some strange visions. The quote unquote worst part, or the most like the time where you're sort of like still being led into the dark underworld, being stripped of all your comforts and finery, being stripped of your glamour. That period will be today, Saturday, March 1st through March 22nd. So just after the spring equinox, in between eclipses, that's like the worst of it. The most challenging, the most, like if you're dog paddling to get out of hell, don't do that. Just walk into hell calmly, give up your beautiful robe, wipe off your full glam makeup, step into really bad lighting. You have to learn how to operate without those things right now, but later you can have them back. This might be a time, you know, in between hair washings, there's one day that's just like, put it in a bun. That could be a workaround. Try to apply that to any other Venus thing. Put it in a bun, slick it back, it's dirty. So Venus stations retrograde around 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, and around 7:30 Pacific time, the moon in Aries conjoins Venus. So Saturday is very, like, not only does Venus station retrograde, but the moon steps in to that scene, and then the moon activates Venus immediately. So you'll get a pretty resounding, especially if you're a Venus-ruled person or you're in a Venus-ruled year. I'm unfortunately both, or fortunately, this is my time to reconsider things. Also, the moon sextiles Jupiter around 10 p.m. Pacific. On a normal moon conjoins Venus, moon sextiles Jupiter day, that's pretty fun. So this will be pretty fun, maybe not so horrifying. Venus retrogrades are difficult. You might be presented with some fun that you normally like to have, and you find you don't really want to do that. Or you could really want to do something that you have recently been enjoying, and you can't enjoy it. Or you do it and there's something like messed up about it. Normally this would be a fun night. It will still be a fun night, but much more complicated. And late night on Saturday, the moon is squaring Mars. This is a very changing of the guard day, Saturday, pointing in a more stressful way than on Friday at how Mars is moving forward. Venus is moving backwards. They're moving in opposite directions, and they're squaring each other. And the moon is drawing attention to this, touching Venus and making contact with Venus. It sounds a little dirty, but it is like, it's Venus retrograde in a Mars-ruled sign, in detriment, receiving something you don't want, It could be a little like dirty. That's a possibility. It could be like, watch out for receiving affection that you don't want, or affection happening and then learning later that it was unwanted. The last time Venus stationed retrograde, I had a major life event happen on that day. It was stationing in my perfected house. So there could be, if you are in a Venus ruled year or that's happening in an activated part of your chart, there could be something prominent just on or around that day. The thing to remember is like, things are gonna be messy. Love doesn't have to be perfect. And right now, it's not going to be. Oh, watch. It's like a Google talk called You Will Probably Marry the Wrong Person. Watch it now. I'll mention it again in my Venus retrograde video. But one thing he says is something that love really is. It's not like everything always being amazing. It's offering the other person the charity of trying to understand where they're coming from. So if something bad happens, instead of just being offended and saying, F you, it's giving people the benefit of the doubt, wanting to learn about where they're coming from, understanding that they, just like you, are a whole human, real person, a genuine extrusion of consciousness into a human body, just like you. Whatever they did or said came from a genuine place. Love is trying to understand that, offering a loved one the option to be understood in that way. So Saturday is so complicated. Fun, stressful, maybe something ends up being a little bit of a powder keg going into the late night, or waking up to a powder keg on Sunday morning. Sunday morning, the moon square with Mars completes around 6 a.m. Pacific time. Mercury conjoins Neptune, which is like, if you thought the creative PowerPoint presentation was unclear, things get less clear. Maybe attempts to make it clear make it even more unclear, or even more beautiful and romantic, or both. The sun squares Jupiter, so there is like ruler of Pisces, but in detriment. All over the place, too much information, romantic vision of how that information should be organized. It's Jupiter's closing square with the sun, so we're closing down a Jupiter cycle. Jupiter will begin a new cycle with the sun June 24th in the sign of Cancer, which is the sign of Jupiter's exaltation. So Jupiter has been in not great shape the past year. Now Jupiter will be in the best shape and start as it means to go. So that bodes well for Jupiter later. But now we're closing that down. This is the last phase where you're wrapping up things that began in the Jupiter parts of your chart, and whatever part of your chart Leo is, around last summer. Sunday's a mixed bag and the moon's void, so it might be all conceptual, emotional, informational, consuming information, whether in the world or in your mind. Go forth and build your own world. Use AI to create a money-making machine based on expression of your spiritual individuality, but don't expect to get all the cables connected in the right place right now. It's just big picture stuff. Remember, your Wi-Fi is a camera that can see through walls.